The Great Recession was a period of economic decline in markets around the world during the late 2000s and early 2010s. The time of this recession varied depending on the country, but this crisis had spread to Europe by 2009, and the effects are still being felt across the continent today. This recession hit Europe hard. To deal with it, European countries resorted to anti-austerity. Anti-austerity is a movement involving the mobilization of street protests and grassroots campaigns. These methods have spread throughout Europe and have resulted in an increase in anti-establishment political parties. Countries such as Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and Greece all implemented anti-austerity actions despite their different economic and political conditions. In Ireland, the global recession and burst of a real estate bubble caused an increase in unemployment rate and debt. The debt became so out of control that austerity was used to cut wages and expenditures. This resulted in protests of over 100,000 people and changes in the ways that unions affect the economy. In Portugal, the crisis was a result of declining trade balance and demand. In an attempt to deal with this and public debt, the government introduced the austerity movement. These movements included cuts in wage, social benefits, pensions, and more. Similarly to Ireland, these policies caused protests of great magnitude. Like Portugal, Spain's crisis was a result of the burst of a real estate bubble and financial problems. Unlike other countries, though, Spain did not immediately resort to measures of austerity. The government tried to fix these problems in other ways, but they proved to be ineffective. The government then began using measures of austerity that, although proving to be relatively efficient, resulted in protest. Greece is considered to be one of the European countries that was affected the most by this ongoing crisis. After its socialist government announced falsified public accounts, the country was in need of financial assistance and had to implement austerity measures that included cutting wages and pensions and increasing taxes. The implementation of this caused a mobilization of the labor movement, meaning many strikes and protests. These examples show that austerity is an issue of national political contention that occurs in countries across Europe.
Another major issue of national political contention that seems to reoccur in countries across Europe is Russian aggression. The Russians are taking an aggressive approach to pushing around their weaker neighbors and getting involved in matters regarding other countries. For example, President Putin annexed Crimea in early 2014. Crimea has a huge Russian population, and it is in a great location. There is also a naval base that has historical ties to Russia, and it allows them to strategically access both the Black and Mediterranean seas. Russia claimed that Ukrainian rebels entered Crimea with the hopes of carrying out acts of terrorism before the parliamentary elections. However, Ukraine's president denies all of this and thinks that Russia is planning something way worse. Additionally, Poland and Russia have been having issues. In 2010, their relations deteriorated dramatically after a plane crashed in western Russia carrying Polish officials. In September, Russia began military drills in Belarus that could involve over 100,000 troops. This could be the biggest Russian military exercise since the Cold War. People are worried because Crimea was annexed under the same kind of circumstance, a military drill. Now, Russia will aim its missiles at a United States base in northern Poland, which will violate an existing arms treaty. Russia is very tactical. They took advantage of their less military inept neighbors. When Putin sees an opportunity, he jumps on it. No one came to Crimea's aid, so he took it. He is playing the game of chess, trying to get his hands back on territories that were once under the influence of the Soviet Union.
Over the past several years, European countries have also been facing political contention surrounding the migration and refugee crisis. Since 2015, European countries, particularly Greece and Italy, have been receiving thousands and thousands of refugees who have been fleeing poverty and war in countries like Turkey and Syria. The incredible amount of people migrating into Europe has resulted in a political crisis. The EU has been attempting to aid these refugees by providing food and shelter, but by doing this, it creates a large strain on European countries. As a result, the EU must try and restrict the numbers of people entering its borders. The EU has made several attempts to stop the crisis, but opposition always follows the plans. In hopes to better regulating the migrants, the idea of a quota system was established, where each country was to be required to admit a certain number of refugees so that individuals were not overwhelming countries, such as Greece and Italy, common entry points. However, the idea was rejected, and several countries, such as Hungary and the Czech Republic, refused to admit refugees. Recently, an agreement between the EU and Turkey has been reached that has helped reduce the number of migrants. In this accord, Turkey is required to take back irregular migrants who cross into Europe. However, this agreement is also controversial. The uncertainty surrounding the immigration crisis worries political leaders due to the economic strain on European countries and because they are still unsure how well these refugees will integrate themselves into society.